The doors of the martial arts academy swung open, and I stepped in. The floor was gleaming, every inch of it reflecting the dim lights. The faint smell of sweat lingered in the air, a mix of effort, discipline, and unspoken rivalry. But for me, it smelled like failure. I wasn't here for a class. I wasn't here to fight. I was here because, for the last 3 months, no one had bothered to look twice at me. My name's Alex Whitmore. I'm 38 years old, and I'm about to turn everything upside down. You see, when you've been ignored, mocked, and erased from your own family's history, there's only so much you can take. And today, it's my turn to make sure they never forget who I am. You might be wondering, how did I get here? How did I, a woman who's spent years scrubbing floors and cleaning blood-stained mats, end up walking into this room for more than just another shift? Let me take you back to where it all started. Growing up, I was never the one who mattered. That was always Victor. He was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one who never had to work for anything, while I was left in the background, cleaning up messes not just in the dojo, but in life. I was the daughter of a Marine, a woman who once held medals for combat and taught hand-to-hand combat at a national level. But to my family, I was nothing more than a footnote, a janitor. Victor. He was the golden boy. His name was carved in stone, but mine it wasn't even etched in the memories of our parents. He was the man with the reputation, the one everyone looked up to. And me, I was just the woman who swept the floors. I stayed out of sight, out of mind. I kept my head down, cleaned the mats, and let Victor bask in the glory of his martial arts empire. But it wasn't just a dojo. It was our father's legacy, stolen from me. Victor had built it from the ground up, and he made sure everyone knew it while ignoring the fact that I'd been there the whole time. In the shadows, keeping the place running. I never told them who I really was. I didn't need to. The memories of our childhood had been erased from Victor's mind. The things I'd been through, the way I fought side by side with soldiers on the battlefield, all of it was invisible to him. No one knew who I was, and I was okay with that at least. I thought I was. Until that night. You want to see something interesting? Our janitor wants to fight. Victor laughed, a cruel, mocking laugh. It wasn't just the words. It was the way he said it. He wasn't inviting me into a spar. He was locking me out of his world, of his life. Everyone in the room snickered, and I could feel their eyes on me, like I was nothing more than a joke. I stood there, mop in hand, in the corner of the dojo. I paused for a second, the laughter ringing in my ears. I could feel every pair of eyes on me, waiting for me to shrink back, to walk away. But I didn't. "Let me make you a deal," I said, my voice steady, cutting through the laughter. "If I win, you tell them the truth. Gather round, everyone," he announces, his voice booming with theatrical flair. "This is going to be a show. Get ready to witness the janitor fight. I'm doing her a favor." The moment he challenged me, I knew what had to be done. This wasn't just about fighting. This was about proving that the past was not forgotten, that the woman standing before them wasn't just a janitor, wasn't just a woman who was overlooked. This was a woman who had once been a Marine, a woman who had seen the worst of the world and survived. I was done being the invisible woman in the background, done being the joke. It was time for them to see who I really was. But what Victor didn't know, what no one knew, was that this wasn't about proving anything to them. This was about proving something to myself. This was about getting my life back. You think you know what's coming next? Stick around. This is just the beginning. If you've ever been underestimated, like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts, and stay tuned for what happens next. The door creaked as I pushed it open, stepping into the brightly lit dojo. The noise hit me first, the sound of fists connecting with bags, the sharp slap of shoes against the mat, the instructor's commands cutting through the air. It was always like this during training hours. Everyone was too busy working on their own skills to notice me, just the way I liked it. My sneakers scraped the floor as I walked towards the janitor's closet, my eyes scanning the room. There he was, right in the center of it all. Victor, my half-brother, standing there, bathed in the glow of the lights, looking every part the king of this place. Everyone else was just a subject in his court. I had learned to ignore him over the years. But seeing him now looking down at the students, smiling that same smug smile, something inside of me snapped. Victor had it all: the dojo, the empire, the respect, the people. And me, I had nothing, just a mop in my hand, a ragged uniform, and a title that meant nothing: the janitor. But none of them knew the truth. Not one of them had any idea who I really was, what I had done, what I had sacrificed. They didn't know I'd spent years in the Marines. They didn't know I had been a hand-to-hand combat instructor. They didn't know I'd stood in war zones while Victor was back at home, cozy in press rooms, selling his image to anyone who would listen. The truth didn't matter to them, though, to them, I was just another invisible woman, another worker to be ignored. But every night when I came here to clean, the anger built up a little more. I passed by Victor's office. Through the glass walls, I saw him laughing with a group of students, talking about his latest tournament win. As I moved to the far side of the room to mop under the punching bags, I caught snippets of his conversation. You know, guys, I built this from nothing. This whole dojo, this empire. Blood, sweat, and tears. Not everyone can say that. I almost dropped my mop. I stayed quiet, focusing on the floor in front of me, watching the swirls of dirt and dust disappear with each swipe of my mop. But my heart was hammering, because I knew that wasn't true. He hadn't built anything. He'd taken it all from me. Our father's legacy, the house we grew up in, the memories. He had erased me from it all. I stopped mopping and took a deep breath. I wasn't about to let him get away with it anymore. Not tonight. Not ever again. I looked up, catching sight of the plaque on the wall that still bore our father's name, Jensen. That name had meant something once, but now it was just another piece of Victor's carefully constructed lie. Our father's legacy had been reduced to a marketing tool. That was all it was to Victor. He used our father's name to build his little empire while I was left behind, cleaning up after him. And everyone in this dojo, they worshipped him. They didn't know the truth. They didn't know how he'd sold our house without telling me. How he hadn't even sent me the papers. How I had learned through a voicemail. I thought you died over there. Carla, don't act like I did something wrong. That was it. The last time I'd spoken to Victor, I hadn't even been given the chance to speak at all. My own brother, someone I had once looked up to, had erased me from the story of our family. He hadn't just taken our house. He had taken everything. I couldn't just let it slide anymore. I had to make him pay. Not for the house, not for the money, for the truth. Because the truth was the one thing Victor had never wanted anyone to know. So I did what I had always done. I stayed quiet. I kept mopping, I kept cleaning, I kept my distance. But this time, there was something different. This time, I wasn't just cleaning. I was planning. I spent the next few weeks watching him, watching them. The students who thought he was some kind of god. The instructors who nodded in agreement with whatever he said. I listened to every boast, every self-congratulatory speech. Every word that left his mouth made my blood boil a little more. I wasn't a fool. I knew exactly what he was doing. He was building an empire of lies. And no one could see it. But I could. And that's when the idea hit me. I didn't need to fight him with fists. I didn't need to play his game. I had something better. I had the truth. The plan wasn't going to be simple. I couldn't just waltz in there and demand respect. No. It would have to be strategic. I would use everything I knew about him, about his ego, his need to be adored, and I would break him down, piece by piece, until he was forced to admit the truth. But I wasn't going to just beat him in a fight. No. I was going to make him expose himself. I was going to make him admit to everyone that he was nothing but a fraud. It would take time, but that was okay. I had all the time in the world. Victor standing in front of the class again, teaching a group of students, his voice booming with confidence. Alex watches from the shadows, her eyes narrowing as she observes him. The thing is, Victor had no idea what was coming. He thought I was just a janitor. He thought I was nothing. But by the time I was done, he would realize he'd been messing with the wrong person. He would know that I wasn't just some quiet woman cleaning the floors. I was his sister, and I was about to make him remember that. You won't believe what happens next. Stick around. If you've ever been ignored, underestimated, or erased, comment, and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts, and stay tuned to see what happens when the truth finally comes out. It had been a few weeks since I'd started the plan. Every day, I observed him, Victor, watching how he moved, how he spoke to the students, every boast, every little act of arrogance. It wasn't just about the dojo anymore. It was about everything he'd taken from me, from our family, from our past. Victor had no idea what I was planning. He was too wrapped up in his own world, too sure of himself. He thought I was just some woman cleaning his floors. He didn't even know I was watching, learning, calculating every move. I noticed small things, like how Victor always made sure to pick the best fighters to sit by him, to train with him, to praise him. He surrounded himself with yes men, people who would tell him he was the best, that he was unstoppable. I could see it in their eyes. They didn't know the real Victor. They didn't know how he had torn apart our family, how he had erased me from the picture. And that's where my plan began. I had to make them see the truth, but I wasn't going to do it the way they expected. No, I wasn't going to fight him, not yet. Fighting would be the easy part. The real challenge was exposing him for who he really was. I needed leverage, and I had a lot of it. I spent the next few weeks watching him, watching them. The students who thought he was some kind of god. The instructors who nodded in agreement with whatever he said. I listened to every boast, every self-congratulatory speech. Every word that left his mouth made my blood boil a little more. I wasn't a fool. I knew exactly what he was doing. He was building an empire of lies, and no one could see it. But I could. And that's when the idea hit me. I didn't need to fight him with fists. I didn't need to play his game. I had something better. I had the truth. The plan wasn't going to be simple. I couldn't just waltz in there and demand respect. No. It would have to be strategic. I would use everything I knew about him, about his ego, his need to be adored, and I would break him down, piece by piece, until he was forced to admit the truth. But I wasn't going to just beat him in a fight. No, I was going to make him expose himself. I was going to make him admit to everyone that he was nothing but a fraud. It would take time, but that was okay. I had all the time in the world. Victor standing in front of the class again, teaching a group of students, his voice booming with confidence. Alex watches from the shadows, her eyes narrowing as she observes him. The thing is, Victor had no idea what was coming. He thought I was just a janitor. He thought I was nothing. But by the time I was done, he would realize he'd been messing with the wrong person. He would know that I wasn't just some quiet woman cleaning the floors. I was his sister, and I was about to make him remember that. I approached the academy's lead instructor, Mark. He was the one who had always treated me like a ghost, like I didn't even exist. I knew getting close to him could open doors, and I needed to make sure he saw me as someone he could rely on. "Hey, Mark," I said casually, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've been thinking, maybe I could help out more here. Maybe with the sparring sessions I know a thing or two about techniques." Mark raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. He hadn't taken me seriously before, but now there was something different in the air. "You want to help out?" he asked, his voice skeptical but intrigued. "Sure, why not? We could use someone with your experience." I felt a rush of satisfaction. This was it. This was my opening. I worked with Mark for the next few weeks, showing him what I could do, not just cleaning, but training, sparring, showing him that I wasn't the janitor anymore. I was a fighter. Victor didn't notice me at first, but then one day, he asked Mark why I was getting involved in the classes, why I was starting to train some of the students. Mark shrugged it off, but the seed had been planted. Victor's arrogance was both his strength and his weakness. He thought I was harmless. He thought I was nothing. But as I trained with the students, I could see it in his eyes. He was starting to wonder why I was suddenly getting attention, wonder why I was starting to move in on his territory. And that's when I knew I had him. I sent the email to the one person who would believe me, the one person who knew the truth about Victor, my Uncle Joe. Uncle Joe had always been there for me, even when I was just a kid. He had seen through Victor's lies all those years ago, and now, he was the key to bringing everything crashing down. Cut to the dojo the next day. The camera focuses on Victor's face, his expression shifting from confidence to confusion as he watches Alex and Mark training together. Victor was starting to feel the heat, but he still didn't know what was coming. He still didn't know how close I was to making him fall. And just when I thought I had it all under control, I saw something that made my stomach turn. Cut to Alex looking through a file in Mark's office, her hand trembling as she opens a folder that contains a photo of her father. A man Victor had betrayed. Victor had gone too far this time, and the game was about to change. "You think you've seen it all? Wait until you see what happens next. You won't believe it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming. Stay tuned." The sun had barely risen when I pulled into the parking lot, the empty spaces stretching out in front of me. The dojo was quiet this early in the morning, but I had to get in there before anyone noticed. It was time to set the next phase of the plan in motion. Victor had no idea what I was about to do. In fact, no one did. But it didn't matter. I had already set the wheels in motion, and there was no turning back now. I stepped out of my car, the chill of the morning air hitting my face, the smell of fresh air mixed with the faint scent of wood and leather from the dojo, the same scent that had been there for years, the same dojo where I'd been treated like nothing more than a shadow, an afterthought, but not anymore. I had the leverage now. I had the evidence, and this time, I wasn't just going to sit back and watch as Victor continued to destroy everything I had once cared about. I was going to make him face the truth. I was going to make him admit who he really was. I moved like I belonged. No hesitation, no second thoughts, just pure determination. I'd spent weeks gaining their trust, learning the ins and outs of the dojo, and now I was ready to bring it all crashing down. I walked straight into the training area. The mats were still fresh with the smell of sweat from the night before. The room was empty, save for a few early risers working on their punches, their bodies moving rhythmically with the steady beat of the sound system. The dojo was Victor's kingdom, but it wasn't going to be for long. I walked over to the back office, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew what I had to do. I had been planning this for weeks, and now it was time to make my move. I stood in front of a locked file cabinet in the back office. my fingers trembling slightly as I pulled out the key I had stolen from Mark's desk. I knew what was inside that file cabinet. The evidence. I had always known that Victor's empire was built on lies, but the things I found in that cabinet documents that proved just how deep his deception ran were beyond what I had expected. There were contracts, bank statements, legal papers, and the letter. The letter that my father had written before his death. The one Victor had hidden away, keeping it from me. The letter that exposed everything: how Victor had stolen the inheritance meant for both of us. How he had manipulated our parents into giving him control of the dojo. I didn't need to read anymore. I knew enough. I was ready. I pulled the letter from my pocket, holding it up for him to see. The look on his face changed. The arrogance melted away, replaced by something darker. Fear. Fear that he wasn't untouchable anymore. "What is that?" he asked, his voice shaking slightly. "It's the truth," I replied, my voice cold. "The truth you've been hiding for years. And it's about to ruin everything you've worked so hard to destroy." I could feel the tension in the room. The students were starting to gather, whispering among themselves. They were watching. And for the first time in years, Victor was the one who was on the defensive. "I'm not letting you get away with this anymore," I said, my heart pounding in my chest. "I'm not going to be your shadow, not anymore." Victor took a step forward, his face twisted with rage. "You don't know what you're talking about," he hissed. "You think you can just waltz in here and take everything I've worked for. You think you can bring me down." "You're already done," I said, my voice low and steady. "It's over." The room went silent, all eyes on us. For a moment, I thought I might actually see him crack, but then his eyes narrowed, and he took a deep breath. "Let's see how long you last," he sneered. "You think this will end well for you? You've underestimated me for far too long," I said, stepping back. "You'll see soon enough." As I turned and walked away, I could feel the weight of the moment sinking in. The pieces were falling into place. This wasn't just about Victor anymore. This was about me, about taking back what was mine. And there was no turning back. You won't believe what happens next. Trust me, this is just the beginning. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you think Victor's about to get what's coming to him. Don't miss the next part. You'll want to be here for this. The gym was eerily quiet as I stepped into the ring. It was early in the morning, and only a few dedicated students were there, working on their routines. But the air felt heavy, like a storm was waiting to break. My palms were sweating, the cold steel of the ring under my fingers as I adjusted my stance. Victor was on his way. I had sent the invitation for him to meet me here, with the promise that it was time to settle things. The truth was out, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. This wouldn't be over until he understood exactly what he had stolen from me and from our family. I adjusted the wraps around my hands, pulling them tight. Every motion felt deliberate, calculated. The rhythm of the gym faded into the background, replaced by the hammering of my heartbeat. The moment I had waited for was drawing closer. I had spent weeks watching him, studying his movements. I knew how he thought, how he reacted. I knew how much pride he took in his reputation, in his so-called empire. I had learned to read him like a book, how he would always puff out his chest when people praised him, how he would get defensive whenever someone questioned his success. His ego was his Achilles heel, and I was about to exploit it. The gym door swung open, and there he was, Victor, dressed in his usual workout gear, strolling in like the king he thought he was. His eyes immediately found me, narrowing as he took in the sight of me standing there, ready to face him. "You really think this is going to end well for you, Alex?" he said, his voice dripping with mockery. His usual arrogance was there, but this time, there was something different, a flicker of doubt. Maybe he wasn't as sure of himself as he liked to appear. Let's see, I said, my voice steady but sharp. The words were out before I could stop them. But they felt right. They felt like the start of something long overdue. I gestured toward the ring. Come on, Victor, let's settle this. He sneered at me, but there was hesitation in his movements. You're still not getting it. This isn't just about you. You think you can walk in here and... No, I cut him off, stepping into the center of the ring. This is about everything you've taken from me, from our family, and this is where it ends. He laughed. Though it was strained, he had the upper hand he always did. Or at least, he thought he did. You think anyone's going to believe your little lies? You're just bitter because you've been left behind. That was it. The arrogance. The dismissive tone, it triggered something inside me. I wasn't just fighting him physically anymore. I was fighting for the years that had been stolen from me. I was fighting for my place in the world. I was fighting to make him see me, to make him understand that I wasn't invisible anymore. He moved closer to me, trying to intimidate me with his size and presence. But I didn't back down. I didn't flinch. I had been broken once before, but not anymore. Let's do this, I said again, this time louder. The words rang in the gym, and I saw the doubt flicker in his eyes. I had caught him off guard. Victor lunged at me, quick and powerful, but I was ready. I dodged to the side, feeling the rush of air as his punch narrowly missed my face. His arrogance was his downfall. He expected me to freeze, to panic. But I had learned to anticipate, to move before the strike even came. I countered, throwing my shoulder into him, sending him stumbling back. He regained his balance quickly, but the look on his face told me everything I needed to know. I wasn't the same person I used to be. I could see him starting to doubt himself. The cocky smile was gone, replaced with the same defensiveness that always lurked under his polished exterior. He had spent years building an image, but now, he was facing the reality of who he truly was. Victor's fists were flying now, faster and with more intensity. Each one came at me with the force of years of pent-up frustration. But it was clear that he wasn't controlling the fight. He was reacting to me, and that's when I knew I had him. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for everything he had destroyed. The legacy he had stolen, the respect he had taken, the truth he had hidden from everyone. I ducked under his punch and took the opportunity to land a solid blow to his side. He gasped for air, stumbling back again, but this time, he didn't recover as quickly. I could see it in his eyes, fear. And that's when I realized I had already won. The fight wasn't just about the physical blows. It was about the truth that had been buried for too long, the truth that would finally come to light. And in that moment, as he struggled to keep up, I knew it was only a matter of time before everything crumbled around him. He took another swing, but this time, I was ready. I twisted my body, using his own momentum against him. In one swift move, I sent him to the mat, watching as he hit the ground hard. The room was silent. The students had stopped watching, and all that was left was the sound of our breathing. I stood over him, my chest rising and falling with the adrenaline. It's over. Victor, I said, my voice low but firm. You're not the king here anymore. You never were, and I'm done being your shadow. For a long moment, he just lay there, staring up at me, his chest heaving with every breath. And then, finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. You think they'll believe you? He asked, his voice tinged with desperation. I don't need them to, I replied. The truth is enough. I turned my back on him. Walking away from the ring, I could hear him get up behind me, his footsteps heavy and unsure. But I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I had already won. The day after the fight was the calm before the storm. The dojo was quieter than usual. The usual hustle and bustle had been replaced by an eerie silence. No one spoke much. The students that had once surrounded Victor like disciples now seemed uncertain, hesitant. They weren't sure what to make of the spectacle they had witnessed the day before. I could feel their eyes on me as I walked through the gym, heading to the back to start my shift. It was a strange feeling, knowing that I was no longer just the invisible woman sweeping the floors. No, I was someone now. I had exposed the truth, and I wasn't going back to being the janitor. Not now, not ever. I glanced over at Victor's office. The door still cracked open. I could hear muffled voices inside, but I couldn't make out the words. My heart skipped a beat. Was he in there with someone? Was he plotting his next move? I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. This wasn't over. It couldn't be. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, and pushed the door open. Victor was sitting behind his desk, his head down. His shoulders were slumped in defeat. The usual cocky grin was gone, replaced by a look of sheer frustration. He didn't even look up when I walked in. "So, this is it," I asked, my voice calm but sharp. "This is how it all ends, hiding behind your desk like a coward." He looked up slowly, his eyes dark with anger. But there was something else there now, a hint of fear. The fear of losing control, the fear of being exposed. "You don't understand, Alex," he said, his voice low and strained. "You think you can just take everything from me and walk away. You think this ends here. You think I'll let you ruin everything I've worked for." I took a step closer to him, my voice steady but cutting through the air like a knife. "It was never yours to begin with, Victor. You built this empire on lies. You thought you could erase me, bury me, make me disappear. But I'm still here. I'm still standing. And I'm not going anywhere." Victor's face twisted with rage. "You don't get it. Do you think they'll believe you? Do you think anyone cares about your little sob story?" The words stung. I could feel the weight of the years of being pushed aside, of being silenced. But it didn't matter anymore. I wasn't the same person I used to be. And he wasn't the same person either. The man in front of me was just a broken shell of the person who had once ruled our family's legacy with an iron fist. "You're wrong," I said, my voice steady, yet filled with a quiet fury. "They'll believe me. They already do." And with that, I turned and walked out, leaving him alone in his office, where the silence seemed louder than ever. I spent the rest of the day cleaning, my mind racing. I had exposed Victor for who he really was. But now, the question was, what would the others do? Would they stand by his side, or would they finally see him for the fraud he was? That evening, I couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty gnawing at me. As much as I wanted to believe that everything would fall into place, I knew better. Victor still had influence. He had people who would back him, people who didn't care about the truth as long as their lives stayed comfortable. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I needed to make sure this time. Victor couldn't slither his way out. He needed to pay. He needed to be exposed to the world for who he really was. The man who had taken everything from me. The man who had lied, manipulated, and betrayed those closest to him. I couldn't just let him walk away from this, not when I had finally found my voice. The next few days were a blur. Tensions in the dojo were high. I could feel the eyes of the students on me whenever I entered the room. Some of them were still loyal to Victor, but others more and more each day were starting to question his integrity. They were beginning to see the cracks in the facade he had so carefully built. And that's when I realized something that made my blood run cold. Victor had started to turn people against me. He was using his influence to spread lies, telling anyone who would listen that I had been the one to destroy everything. He painted me as the villain. He had to. He couldn't afford to lose everything. His empire was built on deception. And if the truth came out, it would all fall apart. So, he fought back with everything he had. I wasn't sure if it was working. The students were divided. Some had started questioning him. Others were falling right back into his grasp. But I couldn't stop now. I had already taken the first steps. I had already exposed him for who he really was. But now, I had to do more. I had to make sure that the truth spread, that the lies he had told over the years didn't just die with him. I had a plan, a bigger one than I had before, one that would bring him to his knees. It was late one evening when I found myself sitting at my desk in the small office I had been assigned. The sound of the dojo's equipment echoing in the background was a reminder of how much was at stake. I knew it wasn't just about Victor anymore. This was about more than just revenge. It was about justice. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the contact list. I needed to reach out to someone who could help me. Someone who would have the power to expose Victor in a way that even he couldn't spin. Someone who had influence. My finger hovered over the contact for a long moment before I pressed send. It was time to take the final step, the one that would bring everything crashing down. You won't believe who I'm reaching out to now. The end is closer than ever, and the truth is about to come out in the most explosive way possible. Stay tuned. The day had come. Everything I had worked for, every move I had made, had led up to this. I sat in my small office, staring at the phone in my hand. It was buzzing with notifications, messages from people I didn't expect to hear from. My heart raced as I scrolled through them. Word was out. The truth was spreading. Victor was scrambling. The walls were closing in on him. And he knew it. I had sent the email to Uncle Joe, just like I promised myself. The letter, the proof, the records, all of it was in his hands now. It was inescapable. I knew what Victor had done. But I needed Uncle Joe to help me finish this. I needed someone with the power to take it to the next level. The calls had been made, and now the police were involved. It wasn't just about Victor anymore. It was about what he had done to all of us. The lives he had ruined, the truth he had hidden. And now, the law was going to make him pay. I could feel the pressure mounting. I was waiting for Victor's next move. He'd already tried to smear my name, telling people I was a liar. But now, it didn't matter. The evidence was out. It wasn't just my word anymore. Everyone would see who he truly was. The next day, everything changed. When I walked into the dojo, the atmosphere was different. The tension in the air was thick, suffocating. But it wasn't because of me. It was because of Victor. I walked in, head high, but I could feel the weight of every eye on me. People were talking in hushed tones, glancing over their shoulders. The rumors were circulating faster than I could have imagined, and for the first time, I realized it wasn't just about the dojo. It wasn't just about Victor and me anymore. This was bigger than that. "You don't know what she's done," Victor was saying, his voice rising. "She's trying to tear everything down. She's a fraud. All of this is her doing. She's the one who wants to ruin me." The group stood in silence. I could see the cracks in his empire starting to show. Some of them, the ones closest to him, were no longer looking at him with the same blind admiration. His grip on them was slipping, and there was nothing he could do about it. I walked past them, my heart steady, eyes focused. I didn't need to say anything. I didn't need to argue. The truth was speaking for itself. "Call me when you can. We need to talk about how to handle this from here." I could feel my stomach drop. This was it, the final piece of the puzzle. It was time to face the consequences. I dialed his number immediately. "Alex," Uncle Joe answered, his voice steady but grave. "It's time. The media's picking this up. They're running the story. The police are coming in. And we've got everything we need to take Victor down." The weight of his words hit me all at once. Everything was falling into place. "You think this is the end?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "What happens next?" "The truth will set things right, but the fallout won't be pretty. We need to brace ourselves for what comes after. This won't be just about Victor anymore. It'll be about what's exposed." I hung up the phone, feeling a strange mix of relief and dread. Victor had been hiding for so long, but now he had nowhere to run. He was cornered, and this time, there was no way out. The whole dojo would be watching, waiting to see if he would finally face the consequences of his actions. I had exposed him for who he was, the man who had stolen from our family, who had hidden behind lies for too long. But what happened next? How far would this go? I sat in the silence for a moment, my mind racing through the possibilities. The truth had come to light. But the real question was, how would everyone react? Would the truth change anything for the students? For the people who had worshipped him, would they turn on him? Or would they continue to let him control their lives? The dojo felt emptier than ever as the officers escorted Victor out. His head hung low in defeat. It wasn't just the physical space that felt empty. It was the realization that everything he had built, the empire, the image was shattered in an instant. He had lost. And it wasn't just me who had taken him down. It was everyone he had manipulated. I took a deep breath. Watching as Victor was driven away, the sense of victory washed over me. But it wasn't just about winning. It was about justice. It was about exposing the lies that had held me captive for so long. But even as the dust settled, I knew this wasn't the end. There was still work to do. I wasn't done yet. The dojo needed to heal, and I needed to find my place in it again. Not as the janitor, not as the invisible woman, but as someone who had stood up and fought for what was right. And as I walked away from the dojo for the last time, I couldn't help but smile. The truth had won. But the real battle, that was still to come, it's never really over. The truth is a powerful thing, but it doesn't just change the people around you. It changes you too. Stick around. You never know what happens next. Story 2. I didn't know what heartbreak felt like until I saw them together, my husband and my own mother. That moment, when I stood there behind the kitchen window, holding my 11-year-old son's hand as he gripped mine so tightly it almost hurt, was the moment I knew everything I'd believed in was a lie. We were a family, or at least, I thought we were. My name is Rebecca Miller, and this is the story of how I lost everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and family, and how I rebuilt myself from the ashes. The leaves crunched under my feet as I stood still, watching. The autumn air was crisp, but nothing compared to the cold slicing through my chest as I heard them. I was hiding behind the window, praying my breath wouldn't give me away. You can't keep pretending. Helen, she's too weak for someone like me. Brandon's voice, my husband, the man I married almost 12 years ago, rang out, too clear and too cold. And then I heard my mother's laugh, a sound that used to comfort me, now sharp and cruel. I told you, I warned you not to marry her. She's a mess. Always crying, always needing something. You should have known better. Brandon. My heart sank as the world seemed to shift beneath me, my vision blurry from the tears I couldn't even understand. How did it come to this? I had spent so many years believing in my family, in the idea that love was enough. I gave everything I had, every ounce of patience, every drop of sacrifice to build a life with Brandon, a life I thought was perfect. I even had my son, Tyler, to make everything feel whole. But that day, standing frozen behind the kitchen window, I knew it was all a lie. Every moment I'd spent building my life had been built on a foundation of deceit. It wasn't just Brandon. No, it was my mother, too. Tyler looked up at me with those big brown eyes, his face full of confusion. He could sense something was wrong. My hand, which had once been a source of comfort for him, now felt like a lifeline I was holding on to myself. "Mom," he asked quietly, still squeezing my hand. His innocent voice snapped me out of the daze I was in. I pressed my finger to my lips, signaling him to stay silent. I didn't want him to know. Not yet. I couldn't let him see me like this. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Tyler, too. For years, I had been the good wife, the one who stood by her husband's side through the long hours of work, the weekends spent alone while he focused on his construction business. I had accepted it. It was what you did when you loved someone, right? Brandon wasn't perfect, but I told myself I loved him enough to make it work. Maybe I wasn't the most exciting person, but I was real. And I loved him with everything I had. But what was I left with? The man I'd given my trust to, my future to. He was already planning to leave me. My mother, who I thought would always have my back, was egging him on, telling him I wasn't worth his time. I was too broken, too weak. I wasn't enough. I had always thought I was too much, too loud, too needy, too emotional. But this was something else. This was the crushing realization that I had been nothing more than a convenience to them both. Brandon wasn't just talking about leaving me. He was talking about taking everything. The money, the insurance money from my father's death, the money I thought we were saving for Tyler's college fund. He didn't care. It was all just a means to an end. "I'm done playing the caring husband to someone so pathetic." Brandon's voice echoed in my mind. I gripped the windowsill to keep myself from falling. The money I thought was mine and Tyler's future, gone in a second. It hit me harder than anything else. My whole life, my love, my sacrifices. Everything was nothing but a tool for them to use. And now they were going to take it all, without a second thought, without a shred of guilt. But I wasn't going to let that happen. No one ever warned me how far someone would go when they thought you were weak. But I was done being weak. I wasn't going to let Brandon and my mother walk all over me anymore. I wasn't the woman they thought I was. I pulled Tyler away from the window, trying to calm him, trying to keep my composure. I needed to think. I needed to plan. I couldn't let him see how close I was to losing myself, how close I was to breaking. But deep down, something inside me clicked. I wasn't going to just let them destroy everything I'd worked for. I wasn't going to let them take away my son's future, my dignity. I was going to make them pay. I didn't know what I was going to do, or how I was going to do it. But I knew one thing: I was going to make sure Brandon and my mother learned just how wrong they were. They thought I was weak. They thought I was broken. They were about to find out exactly how wrong they were. As I walked to my car, my mind already racing with plans, one thought kept repeating in my head: it's time to take back what's mine. But before I could even get the keys in the ignition, a text buzzed on my phone. It was from my mother. "I'm sorry, Rebecca. This was never supposed to happen." I stared at the screen, confused. Was this a joke? What did she mean? And that was when I knew this was just the beginning. Stay tuned for the next part of my story. I wasn't sure when it happened, but I knew something was changing. The air in my house felt different, like it was thick with lies, and I couldn't breathe. Maybe I had been ignoring the signs for too long, or maybe I just didn't want to see them. But now, as I stood in the living room, staring at the family photos hanging on the wall, it felt as though the walls were closing in around me. I've been living a lie. Brandon's face in those pictures, so warm, so familiar, now felt like a mask I had been wearing for years. His smile, once comforting, now seemed hollow. How could I not have seen this before? How could I have been so blind? We had been a family, a perfect family, or so I thought. Our son Tyler, the light of my life, and Brandon, my husband. We had a house, a dog, and I believed we had love. That was all I thought I needed. But the truth was something darker. The house we lived in was a small but cozy 3-bedroom in Riverside, California. It was a town where everyone knew everyone else's business, but they kept it to themselves until it became too obvious to ignore. Maybe that was my first mistake, believing that privacy still existed in this little town. Brandon worked at a small construction company he had started years ago. He was good at his job, and the men in town respected him. It wasn't a glamorous life, but it was ours. He'd come home late most nights, exhausted but proud. He'd tell me about the jobs he'd finished and the money we were making. But I never asked too many questions. I trusted him. I trusted him the way you trust someone you love. And I had loved him fiercely. Too fiercely. I realize now. I would wait for him to come home, sometimes sitting in the kitchen, watching the clock tick away the hours. I'd have dinner ready, try to keep things normal for Tyler. I didn't know what else to do. It was just part of the routine, and I was used to it. I told myself that I loved him, and that was enough. But Tyler, he noticed. Of course, he noticed. He wasn't a little boy anymore. He was growing up, and he saw more than I wanted him to. I could tell by the way his eyes lingered on me, the way he would fidget when Brandon came home late. He didn't say anything, but I could feel the questions hanging in the air. What's wrong with Daddy? Mom, why is he always late? And there was me always pushing the questions away, telling him everything was fine, just like I told myself. It wasn't fine. The day it all started to unravel, I was at the library, my part-time job where I tried to lose myself in the quiet. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. It was my space away from the chaos. Mrs. Maverick, my boss, was there as usual, shelving returns. She was in her 60s, with a warm smile that reminded me of my grandmother. She always made me feel like I belonged, unlike my own family. We were having our usual small talk when I overheard something that made my stomach churn. I saw Brandon Miller at the diner yesterday. Janet, one of the other librarians, said in a voice that carried across the room. Really, Mrs.? Maverick replied, sounding surprised. I didn't know they knew each other so well. Oh, they know each other very well, Janet said, with that tone you use when you're implying something but don't actually say it. I stopped organizing the books, my hand frozen in place. My mind raced. Brandon and my mother. What were they doing together? Maybe they ran into each other, I said to myself, trying to dismiss the thought. But my gut told me otherwise. Why didn't I see this coming? I didn't know it yet. But that moment was the beginning of the end, the moment the lies started to pile up. That evening, when I picked Tyler up from school, the feeling of dread hadn't left me. It was there, lurking in the back of my mind, and no matter how I tried to push it away, it wouldn't go. Hey, buddy, I said, trying to sound normal. How was school today? Fine, Tyler answered, his voice sounding a little distant. Mom, can we go see Dad at work? I want to see the construction site. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if it was a good idea. But then I remembered how much Tyler loved spending time with Brandon, even though, lately, those moments had become fewer and fewer. He missed his dad, just like I did. Sure, why not, I said, forcing a smile. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Brandon's truck wasn't parked in front of the construction site when we arrived, and that struck me as odd. Normally, he'd be working there late into the evening, but today, nothing. We drove around the block, and as I turned the corner onto my mother's street, I froze. There it was. Brandon's truck, parked in my mother's driveway. My chest tightened, my heart rate quickened. Tyler, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me, asked, "Mom, why are we stopping?" I didn't answer right away. My thoughts were racing, and I tried to calm myself down. This can't be happening. "Isn't that Dad's truck?" Tyler asked again, a little more insistent now. I took a deep breath, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I couldn't let him see how terrified I was.
"Yeah," I said, barely able to choke out the words. "It is."
I wanted to turn around, to drive away and pretend I hadn't seen anything. But the need for answers was too strong. I parked across the street from my mother's house, the weight of the moment settling heavily on my shoulders. Tyler looked up at me, confused, but I couldn't bring myself to explain. I wanted to tell him everything, but I couldn't. I wasn't ready for that yet. What the hell was going on? We stayed in the car for what felt like forever, and the longer I sat there, the more the pieces began to fit together. Brandon had been distant for weeks. I had noticed it. The late nights, the way he was always on his phone, the way he seemed to be pulling away from me. But I didn't want to face it. Not like this. Not with Tyler in the car. But now I had to know. Before I could even make a decision, the front door to my mother's house opened, and out stepped Brandon, laughing. He wasn't alone. My mother, Helen, was right behind him, a smile on her face, the kind of smile she always wore when she was up to something. I sat frozen in the car, my heart pounding in my chest. What was going on here? Why was he here? Why was she smiling like that? And just like that, the pieces fell into place. The betrayal was no longer a whisper. It was loud. It was right in front of me. I didn't know what to do next, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. My mind was spinning as I sat there in the car, watching Brandon laugh with my mother like nothing had changed. It was like the world around me had gone silent. I could hear the sound of my own breath, shallow and uneven. My hands, which had been gripping the steering wheel so hard, were starting to feel numb. What the hell is going on? It felt like my entire life had just crumbled in front of me, and I had no idea how to pick up the pieces. My brain screamed at me to confront them right then and there, but my body stayed frozen. Brandon smiled. That smile, the same one he used to give me after a long day of work. A smile that made me believe in us, in our future, now. It felt like a slap in the face. My mother's smile, her cold, calculating grin sent chills down my spine. How could she? How could she betray me like this? How could they both betray me? I sat there, staring through the windshield, trying to understand how things had gotten so twisted. A part of me wanted to confront them, walk right up to the door, throw it open, and demand answers. But I knew deep down that wasn't going to help. I wasn't ready to face them, not yet. There was too much to lose, too much at stake. I glanced over at Tyler, still in the passenger seat, looking out the window, oblivious to the storm inside me. He was the only thing that mattered now. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about him, my baby boy, who had been innocent to all of this, who deserved so much more than this mess I was stuck in. I took a deep breath and started the car, slowly pulling away from the curb. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I had to get away from them, away from this reality. The next few days were a blur of confusion, anger, and fear. I couldn't stop thinking about what I had seen. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Brandon and my mother laughing together. I replayed their words in my head over and over, like a broken record. "She's too weak for someone like me. I told you, Brandon. I warned you not to marry her." It wasn't just the betrayal that stung, it was the cruelty behind their words. It wasn't enough for them to tear me apart. No, they had to make sure I knew exactly how much I wasn't worth, how much I didn't matter to them. And the worst part, I had let it happen. I had been blind to their manipulation. Every time I tried to distract myself, tried to focus on Tyler, the thoughts crept back in. But then, something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. Not again. Not anymore. I sat up straight in bed one night, staring at the ceiling, the dark thoughts swirling in my mind. I couldn't stay in this house any longer. I couldn't stay in this life. I had to fight back. I had to take control of this situation before it consumed me completely. I pulled my phone from the nightstand and started scrolling through my contacts. I needed someone. I needed a plan. That's when I saw his name. James Holt, a lawyer I met years ago when I helped him with a community project. He was sharp, determined, and exactly the kind of person who could help me. I took a deep breath and dialed his number. Rebecca James answered on the second ring. "It's been a while. How are you?" His voice was comforting, familiar, but there was no time for small talk. "I need your help," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need to get out of this situation. I don't know how, but I need a way out." There was a pause on the other end, followed by a sigh. "Of course. We'll figure this out. What's going on?" And just like that, the plan started to form. I told James everything about Brandon, about my mother, about the betrayal. "Listen, Rebecca," he said after a moment, "you don't have to put up with this. You don't need to be silent. You've got options. We'll figure out how to take back control. But it's going to take time, and you have to be ready for what's coming." What was coming, I didn't know. But one thing was clear: I wasn't going to let them get away with destroying me. Not anymore. The next few days were filled with late-night meetings, legal documents, and plans. It felt like a whirlwind, and every moment of it felt like a step toward reclaiming my life. Every time I saw Brandon or my mother, the anger inside me grew, and with it, the determination. They thought they had won. They thought I was weak, but I was going to show them just how wrong they were. I knew the next step wasn't going to be easy. Nothing about this was going to be easy. But if I wanted to take back control, I had to make some hard choices, some risky moves. I had to make them pay for what they had done to me, and I wasn't going to do it alone. James was on my side, and he had a plan. Together, we would expose them for who they really were. A few days later, I stood outside my mother's house, watching her through the window, the anger building up inside me. I had everything I needed now: proof, a plan, and the courage to follow through. But as I stood there, waiting for the right moment, I saw her talking to someone. Who was that? It was someone I didn't recognize, someone too close to my mother. The way they spoke, the way she smiled, it made my skin crawl. What was she hiding now? And why was she talking to someone else? I couldn't wait any longer. I had to find out. This was just the beginning, and I was ready for what was coming next. But I didn't know what this new twist would mean for my plan. The truth had been staring me in the face for weeks. It was no longer about trying to convince myself that everything was okay, that things could go back to how they were before. That was a lie I had been telling myself for years, a lie that now felt so hollow. It made my stomach churn. No, this time it was different. This time, I had proof. I had a plan. But the hardest part, I had to be smart about this. I couldn't just barge in, confront Brandon, and demand an explanation. No. If I wanted justice, I had to play this game carefully. I had to be tactical. And I had to use every advantage I had because, let's face it, they had underestimated me. They thought I was weak. They thought they could just walk all over me without consequence. They were wrong. I'd been to the law office 4 times in the past week, each visit leaving me with more questions than answers. James Holt, the lawyer who had agreed to take my case, was a no-nonsense kind of guy. He wasn't interested in playing games or sugarcoating anything. He wanted results, and so did I.
"Rebecca," he said the first time we met, "this isn't going to be easy. You don't have the luxury of time. If you want to take down Brandon and your mother, we need to move fast, but we also need to be careful. One wrong move, and it all falls apart."
His words hit me like a ton of bricks, but they were the cold, hard truth. And deep down, I knew he was right. I didn't have time to waste. The more I thought about what Brandon and my mother had done, the angrier I became, but I couldn't let my emotions cloud my judgment. Not this time. The plan was simple, or at least, that's what I kept telling myself. I needed evidence, solid evidence that Brandon had been hiding assets. I needed to prove that he had been siphoning off money from our joint accounts, putting it in secret accounts that I had no access to. If I could show that, I could take him to court. I could make sure he paid for everything he had done. But I didn't just want the money. I wanted revenge, too. I couldn't just let them walk away from this scot-free. I wanted to make sure they knew what it felt like to lose everything, just like they had made me feel. James was the one who pointed me in the right direction. "There's one thing you have over them, Rebecca," he said one afternoon, looking over the papers I had brought him. "You have their secrets, the way they think they're above the law. That's their weakness." I stared at him, not fully understanding what he meant. But then it clicked. Brandon had always been the golden boy, the one everyone looked up to in town. My mother, Helen, was the same, always playing the part of the doting mother, the wise elder who had all the answers. But behind closed doors, they weren't the people they made everyone think they were. I needed to expose them for who they truly were. I knew where to start. It was risky, but it was the only lead I had. Brandon's construction business was the key. He had been bragging about all the big deals he had been making recently. But what if those deals weren't as legitimate as he made them sound? What if he was using the company as a front to hide money? I had to get into his office. I had to go through his paperwork, dig into his accounts, and see if I could find any evidence that could tie him to the financial mess he'd been hiding. But the problem was, Brandon always worked late, and his office, his private, locked office, was off limits to anyone, especially me. But I had one thing he didn't have: a plan. The night of the heist, or whatever you want to call it, was the beginning of everything. It was 2 a.m. when I slipped out of the house, a small flashlight and a set of gloves in my bag. Tyler was asleep in his room, and I made sure to double-check the locks before I left. I parked a few blocks away from Brandon's office, my heart pounding in my chest. The streets were empty, and the world felt like it was holding its breath. I pulled the hood of my jacket up and stepped out of the car. Walking toward the building, my hands shook, but I knew this was the only way. This was the only chance I had to get what I needed. The office was dark when I arrived. I tried the front door locked, of course, but I wasn't going to let that stop me. I'd already thought ahead. I had called a locksmith earlier that week, pretending to be Brandon. I knew that would be the only way to get access. The door creaked open slowly, and I slipped inside, shutting it behind me. The smell of stale paper and dust filled the air. I flicked on my flashlight, scanning the room. My eyes landed on his desk, the one he always claimed was too cluttered for anyone else to use. I pulled open the drawer. Nothing too interesting. A few old receipts, a pen, a notebook. But then, there it was, a folder, tucked behind a stack of papers. I grabbed it and flipped it open, my hands trembling as I scanned the contents. It was a list of accounts names, numbers, and transactions that didn't make sense, large sums of money transferred to an account I didn't recognize. I swallowed hard, my breath catching in my throat. This was it. This was the evidence I needed. I backed away from the desk, my heart racing. I had what I came for. But as I turned to leave, I heard a noise, a faint sound like footsteps. I froze. My eyes darted toward the door. Had someone heard me? Suddenly, the door to the office swung open, and there, standing in the doorway, was Brandon. His eyes locked onto mine. "You really thought you could get away with this," he sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. I felt my pulse race as panic washed over me. My plan had worked, but now, it was all about to fall apart. I was frozen, standing in the dim light of Brandon's office, the folder with damning evidence clutched in my hand. My pulse raced, pounding in my ears as I stared at him. The man who had once been my partner, my confidant, was now standing in front of me, his eyes cold, his jaw tight. The smile I had once loved now twisted into something dark. "Rebecca," Brandon's voice was a low, menacing growl. "You should have known better than to come here. This is over." I didn't flinch. My legs felt like stone, my body refusing to move, but my mind was working faster than ever. I can't let this slip away. Not now. Not after everything I've sacrificed. "I'm not leaving without the truth." "Brandon," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "You've lied to me for years. And now, you're going to answer for it." The words hung in the air between us, thick with tension. I could feel my heart beating so loudly I was sure he could hear it, too. But I wasn't going to back down. Not anymore. Brandon took a slow step forward, his eyes narrowing. "You think you can just walk into my life and tear everything apart? You're nothing. Rebecca, you always were. Just a little girl pretending to be a wife." His words hit harder than I expected, a jab to my pride. But it wasn't the time to fall apart. It wasn't the time to show weakness. "Your mother knew, didn't she?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The question was simple, but it cut deeper than anything I could have said. Brandon's face flickered just for a second, but that brief moment of hesitation told me everything I needed to know. He knew exactly where this was going, and he was terrified. "Don't bring her into this," he snarled, his voice rising. "This is between you and me." I let the silence stretch. The folder was still in my hand, and I knew he saw it. The weight of the documents was enough to make him second-guess everything. He was losing control, and I was taking it back. "You've been hiding money, Brandon," I said, the words hitting him like a slap, and not just from me. From everyone, all these years. "You've been living a lie that's been built on my back." His eyes darkened, and for a moment, I thought he might explode. Instead, he clenched his fists at his sides and took another step toward me, the air between us crackling with the electricity of everything that had been left unsaid. "You think you can take me down with a piece of paper?" His tone was dangerous, dripping with contempt. "You really are that stupid." "No," I stood my ground, "but I don't need to. You've already done that for me, and I have proof." I could see it in his eyes. He was panicking, but panic was the last thing I needed. What I needed was leverage, and I had just enough. I took a deep breath and stepped around him, moving toward the door. His eyes never left me, his entire body taut with rage. But he didn't stop me. Not yet. He was calculating, waiting for me to make a mistake. "I'm not here to play games anymore, Brandon," I said, glancing back over my shoulder. "You've crossed a line that can't be undone." I reached for the doorknob, but before I could turn it, I heard him move quickly. He was behind me in an instant, grabbing my arm and spinning me back toward him. "You're making a huge mistake, Rebecca," he growled, his grip tight and painful. "You're going to regret this." I could feel the pressure of his fingers on my wrist, but the anger inside me was louder than the pain. This was it. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. I twisted my arm free, stepping back out of his reach. "You don't get to tell me what to regret anymore," I said, voice steady. "You lost that right the moment you decided to destroy everything we built, everything I sacrificed for you." His face twisted in fury, but I could see something else in his eyes now, fear. It was brief, almost imperceptible, but it was there, and that was all I needed. I left his office with the folder in my hand, but it didn't feel like a victory, not yet. I knew I couldn't just walk away from this. I had to go to the authorities. I had to make sure this wasn't just a piece of paper that would get lost in the shuffle. No, this needed to be real. I needed it to be undeniable. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I couldn't go to the police without covering my tracks. I needed more evidence. I needed to dig deeper, and I needed someone on my side who could help me execute this plan. And that's when I realized I needed James more than ever. James Holt had been my ally from the beginning, but I hadn't fully understood how deep his connections ran. When I called him that night after leaving Brandon's office, I knew he'd be my last chance. "We're not going to waste time. Rebecca," James said over the phone, "I'll help you. But you have to be prepared for the fallout. Once this is in motion, there's no going back. This is war." His words were a cold reminder of just how far I was willing to go. But there was no turning back now. I had already burned the bridges with my mother and Brandon. The truth had to come out, no matter what. I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I met James in a quiet cafe. Far from the prying eyes of the people who had known me for years, he was already there, sitting in a booth, a stack of legal papers in front of him. His eyes met mine, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I wasn't alone in this fight. "You're ready?" Then James asked, voice low. I nodded, sliding into the seat across from him. "I'm ready." Cliffhanger. But just as I was about to hand over the documents I'd gathered, my phone buzzed. I glanced down at the screen, and my heart stopped. It was a text from my mother. "We need to talk, now." The dread settled in my stomach like a stone. What now? What was she trying to pull? Stay tuned for the next part, where everything will come to a head. My phone buzzed in my hand, and for a second, I thought I might drop it. The screen lit up with my mother's name, the very person I had once trusted above everyone else. My heart dropped into my stomach, and I couldn't look away. I stared at her name, trying to ignore the shiver that ran through me. "We need to talk, now." Her message was short, direct, but what did it mean? Was she really going to try to explain herself after everything, after the betrayal, the lies, the whispered conversations with Brandon? After all of it, I couldn't ignore it. I just couldn't. But I had a decision to make. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about what came next, about how far I was willing to go to reclaim my life. I had to see her. I had to hear what she was going to say, even if it felt like I was walking straight into the lion's den. The drive to her house felt like an eternity. My fingers gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white with tension. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was it the moment everything came crashing down. I thought I was ready. I thought I had prepared myself for the worst, but nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to face. The betrayal that had been festering in my heart for weeks now felt like a weight so heavy, it threatened to swallow me whole. I arrived at her house, my pulse racing in my ears. I parked on the street, just across from her front door, and for a long moment, I just sat there. The silence in the car was deafening. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the air thick with dread. Is this really happening? I couldn't keep waiting forever. I stepped out of the car, my legs shaking with each step. The cool night air did nothing to calm the storm inside me. I rang the doorbell, the sound echoing in the quiet night. A few seconds passed, and then I saw the shadow of her moving inside. The door opened slowly, and there she was, my mother, looking at me with eyes that were almost guilty. I didn't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't this. "Rebecca," she said softly, almost as if she wasn't sure what to say next. Her voice was tentative, not at all like the confident, controlling woman I had always known. The sight of her, standing there on the other side of the door, was almost too much. I wanted to scream at her, to call her out for everything, but instead, I stood there, speechless, my heart pounding in my chest. She stepped aside, motioning for me to come in. "Please, just hear me out." I took a deep breath and walked past her into the house. The familiar scent of her perfume, the warm, cozy feel of her living room, it all felt so wrong now. This was the place I had spent so many years in, thinking it was my safe haven, but now it felt like a trap. We sat down on the couch, the distance between us making everything feel colder. She didn't speak right away, as if she were waiting for me to say something. Finally, I broke the silence. "How could you?" The words came out in a rush, raw and angry. "How could you do this to me? To us you knew what Brandon was doing, what he was hiding, and you said nothing." Her eyes flickered, but she didn't look away. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again, as if trying to find the right words. "Rebecca, I didn't want this. I didn't want you to find out like this. I didn't want to hurt you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You didn't want to hurt me," I repeated, the words tasting bitter. "So you lied to me for months, maybe longer. And that's supposed to be better. You knew everything. Mom, everything." "I didn't know what else to do," she said, her voice trembling now. "Brandon, he was never going to leave me. He was never going to be the man you thought he was. He was always using you, Rebecca. And I thought if I stayed out of it, it wouldn't destroy you." It was a flimsy excuse, and I wasn't going to buy it. "Stay out of it." I laughed bitterly. "You didn't stay out of it. You helped him. You enabled him. I don't know which one of you is worse. At least Brandon doesn't hide his selfishness." Her face paled at my words, but she didn't argue. Instead, she stared at the floor, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I could see the shame in her eyes, and for a second, I thought maybe she felt it. Maybe she was starting to realize how much damage she had done. "I know I've made mistakes," she whispered, finally lifting her eyes to meet mine. "But you don't understand. Rebecca, Brandon was always one step ahead. He promised me things would be better if I just helped him. I never thought it would go this far. I never thought he'd—" "Never thought," I interrupted, my voice rising. "I knew everything about him, and I never thought he would betray me like this. But I never thought you would. Mom, you're supposed to be the one who protects me." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't cry. She just stared at me, waiting for me to say something, anything that would make this all go away. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. The rage I felt was all-consuming, but I had to stay focused. I couldn't let this moment distract me from what came next. This wasn't just about confronting my mother anymore. It was about taking back control. "I've got the evidence. Mom," I said quietly, my voice steady. "I'm going to the authorities. I'm going to make sure both of you pay for what you've done." The words hung in the air between us, a finality that couldn't be ignored. her face drained of color. No, no, Rebecca, you can't. I already have, I said, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Just as I stood to leave, my phone buzzed again. Cutting through the tense silence, I glanced at the screen, and my heart stopped. It was a message from James. You need to get out of there now. Brandon knows. He's coming. I stood there, frozen. As the phone buzzed in my hand, the words from James's message rang in my head like a bombshell. Brandon knows. He's coming. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt beneath me, my heart pounding so loudly it almost drowned out the sounds around me. I stared at my phone, the screen blurring in my vision. Every instinct in my body told me to run, to get out of there before things got worse. But I couldn't. I wasn't running anymore. Not from them. Not from him. Not from the truth. I looked at my mother, who was still sitting on the couch, her face pale and frozen in fear. She hadn't moved since I told her about the evidence. But now, with the clock ticking and Brandon closing in, I could feel her guilt hanging between us like a thick, suffocating fog. This is it. Rebecca, this is the end of the line. The truth is out, and there's no going back. Mom, I said, my voice cold, controlled, but filled with a quiet fury. I'm done with this. I'm done with you. Her eyes welled with tears, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. She made her choices. Now, she had to live with them. I didn't want it to end like this, she whispered, voice trembling. I didn't want to hurt you. Rebecca, you have to believe me. I shook my head, stepping back from her. Belief doesn't matter anymore. The truth does. The truth is that you've been lying to me for years. You've been playing your own little game with Brandon, and I was too blind to see it. But I see it now. I turned to leave, my heart heavy in my chest. But just before I reached the door, I heard her call my name, desperation in her voice. Rebecca, please don't do this. Please don't go to the authorities. It'll ruin everything. You don't know what you're walking into. You don't understand how dangerous this is. I stopped. Her words hung in the air. But the truth settled in me like a cold wave. She was scared, genuinely scared. And for the first time, I realized that she wasn't just a participant in this lie. She was a victim too. But that didn't make her actions excusable. I turned slowly, locking eyes with her. It's too late for that. Mom, it's too late for you and Brandon. I stepped out the door, into the cool night, the weight of the finality of what I had just said sinking into my bones. The drive to the police station felt like I was moving in slow motion. The streets blurred by in a haze, and all I could think about was what came next. I knew I had made the right decision. I knew it deep down, even if it felt like my entire life was unraveling around me. I had to do this. For me, for Tyler, for the truth. The world I had known was slipping through my fingers, but in its place, I was building something stronger, something real. As I arrived at the station, I couldn't help but feel a rush of adrenaline, like I was walking into a new chapter of my life. I pulled into the parking lot, took a deep breath, and walked into the building with James by my side. He was the one who'd helped me organize everything, the one who'd helped me get this far. Now, we were here together, ready to take down the man who had betrayed me and the woman who had aided him. James had already filed the paperwork. The case was ready to go. All that was left was for me to hand over the evidence. And then, Brandon and my mother would have to face the consequences of their actions. There was no turning back. I walked into the police office with a feeling of quiet resolve, knowing that I had done what I could to make sure that justice would be served. The officer at the desk looked up as we approached, and I felt a weight lift off my shoulders just seeing him. There was something calming about the professionalism in his eyes, the steady, reassuring way he motioned for us to sit. "You've made the right choice, Miss Miller," the officer said, as he took the folder from me, his expression serious. "We'll take it from here. Don't worry, this will be handled." I nodded, though the nerves were still there, gnawing at me, but in my gut, I knew I had done the right thing. I wasn't weak anymore. I wasn't afraid of what came next. That night, as I sat in my car outside the station, I thought about the journey I had been through, the years of lies, the pain, the heartbreak, and yet, I felt a strange sense of peace. I wasn't a victim anymore. I wasn't going to let anyone define me or break me. I glanced at my phone. There was a message from Tyler, just a simple text saying, "I love you, Mom." It was a reminder of everything that mattered. I wasn't doing this for revenge. I was doing it for him, for his future, for his sense of security, and for the world I wanted him to grow up in, one where lies didn't go unpunished, and where people knew what it meant to take responsibility for their actions. I drove home slowly, the weight of what I had just done still heavy on my shoulders. But as I parked in front of the house, I felt a small spark of something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. But it was the beginning of something new. I walked inside the house, ready to collapse into bed. But then I saw the letter on the kitchen counter. The handwriting on the envelope was familiar, and my heart skipped a beat when I saw the name at the top.
It was from Brandon.